Welcome, everyone, and good evening. Thank you for joining us this evening. This is Rise Above the Light into Darkness, Finding Courage in Challenging Times. We'd love to know where you're all dialing in from. Please let us know in the chat and welcome. We're going to get started in just a minute. Just some housekeeping rules. If you are not speaking, please mute your microphones. If I find feedback during this session, I will mute you if there's feedback coming from your end. But if you could please mute your microphones, that would be amazing. Thank you so much. Welcome, welcome, everybody. Welcome from New Jersey. Welcome from New York, Winston-Salem, North Carolina, Minneapolis, Minnesota in the house. Welcome, welcome. We are filling up the room fast tonight and excited to get started. Welcome, welcome, everybody. As we have people joining the room right now, let us know where you're dialing in from. And please mute your microphone. We have California coming in. The room is just flooding with people right now. So thank you for joining us tonight. Our session should run just about 2 hours. We're really excited to know how you learned about the event. Can you let us know how you found out about the event? And let us know in the chat as well. Amazing. Facebook. We have people from California here. I was just informed it's 90 minutes. I thought it was 2 hours.
No, there'll be an optional 10-minute Q&A at the end, but the presentation is a 90-minute presentation.
Hopefully it won't feel like 2 hours.
Let's hope. This is going to be amazing, guys. Thanks for joining us. We have our amazing presenters here, Malka Shaw and Jodi Taub. Excited to get started. Malka, what do you think? Should we kick it off?
I think we should give everybody 1 more minute. Did it take a while? Because I think you have to register through the Zoom. Was anybody having a hard time registering through Zoom?
No,
everybody was able to. We just have to do an extra step for security since it's a free event. If anybody says anything that's inappropriate, they will be asked to leave. This is really an event to support the Jewish community, so let's be mindful that that's what the purpose of this event is. And we're really just excited to have everybody here. Thank you so much.
Awesome. I think we could get started, Malka. Let's move over to the first slide, at least to the introductions. So welcome, everybody. We're excited to be here with you tonight. My name is Julie Riga. I'm a professional development and leadership coach. I'm a board member of Kesher Shalom Projects, and I'm so excited to be with you here tonight. We have some amazing presenters here. We have the Malka Shaw, who is an LCSW. She's licensed in New York, New Jersey, and Florida. She's been in the field of mental health for over 25 years and in private practice for 16 years. She has a clinical supervision and training experience and provides all kinds of therapy for women, couples, and she is the founder, the fearless leader of Kesher Shalom Projects. All of this has been made possible because of her resilience and heart to really support Kesher and all that it's doing. And we also have Jodi Taub. She's also an LCSW. She is in private practice as a psychotherapist with more than 25 years of clinical experience. And she specializes in depression, anxiety, grief, loss, relationship issues, and chronic illness. She's trauma-informed, trained, and an expert lecturer, and also a published writer and active mental health contributor. So we are in good hands tonight with our 2 presenters. So I want to just have some acknowledgments and some announcements before we get started. So while the presenters are licensed in mental health, this workshop is not therapy. It's not supposed to be substituted for therapy. It is intended for educational and personal growth purposes only. But all presenters are available for individual consultations, and their contact information will be included in the chat and also followed up by emails with some of their offerings. Our sponsor is OK Clarity, and OK Clarity is an online platform connecting you with vetted mental health and wellness professionals serving the Jewish community. And you can find more information about OK Clarity at okclarity.com. And if you would love to have another workshop or more workshops like this, bring Kesher to your organization, please email us at admin@keshershalom.com. And then during this program, we're going to have several links in the chat. One is a feedback form. We'd be really happy if you filled it in. And then if you're willing to donate any sort of contribution, there'll be also a link for that as well to help out Kesher Shalom as it is working to support more programs like this to help bring more education to life. Thank you. Once again, we're really excited to be here today. If you are not muted, please mute yourself right now. There's just a little bit of feedback. And anybody else that here is a co-host, you can go ahead and mute people. I'm getting some feedback from the audience just to make the experience more pleasant for everybody. What we would love for you to do is be able to hear this without some interruptions. So Kesher Shalom Projects is committed to fostering healing, resilience, solidarity for the Jewish communities, and creating informed, proactive allies throughout education of Jewish trauma, culturally responsive emotional support, and combating anti-Semitism through awareness.
Thank you so much, Julie. So Kesher was a project that started a little bit by accident. Anybody this is not their first time coming to a Kesher event could have heard me say this before. So Kesher started accidentally as a knee-jerk response to October 7th and the atrocities after. It originated on a WhatsApp group for a Jewish therapist, and really quickly we were able to turn it around and to turn it into continuing education courses for mental health professionals. To this date, we have trained over 3,000, probably the estimates around 3,500 participants have been on our continuing ed programs. And we got the idea that our information doesn't have to stay with mental health professionals. We could take some of the material that we built out and we could share it to professionals of all backgrounds, Jewish and not Jewish, different kinds of educational services, and provide direct services like tonight to the Jewish community and do community outreach on important topics like Jewish trauma, mental health, and anti-Semitism. Some of the classes that we talk about are navigating and understanding Jewish trauma. We do for our non-Jewish allies a lot of Jewish cultural competency. Jewish cultural competency is one of those things that can really foster compassion and empathy and build those walls of communications that have been kind of broken down, especially since 10/7. The Guard is an interactive system that I created, where a system that we train not just therapists, but other helping professionals on how to work in the Jewish community during this time of active trauma. In addition, we really go out there and educate people of the clinical implications and the impact of the macro gaslighting and the propaganda and what's been going on in the Jewish world. And lastly, and what I think is also starting to become very important, and there's going to be a class in January, is why is this being spread? How is the propaganda being spread? Why are people falling for it? What is the indoctrination process like? And how are we going to bridge gaps with those that have been indoctrined? And what are the impacts on the society level? So that is going to be a mental health course that is going to be taught January 15th. We hope that you join the newsletter. You do not have to be a mental health professional to sit in on that course. We're not going to release Allison the presentation because we want to ensure privacy. So why is mental health critical in the battle of anti-Semitism? Mental health and mental health professionals are essential not just in the prevention and preventing mental illness and burnout. We are here also to prevent the anti-Semitic bias by helping people understand the impact on the Jewish community, the impact on society, and why anti-Semitism is spreading, and what are the psychological mechanisms that are being used to spread the propaganda. So these are some important points to remember, and I'm going to send it back to Julie.
Thank you, Malka. Thank you for that. And I'm going to read this poem called Fractured Yet Unbroken. Tiny cracks unseen take hold, fractured, formed by grief untold. The weight of stones too much to bear spills sorrow and anguish everywhere. Each stone alone might be withstood, but with constant news of hate, both near and far. From whispered threats to the campus rally cries, each blow intended to shatter our jar. A scream hangs silently, unspoken, for hearts that ache and lives unbroken, for hostages still not home, for our lost children and parents, for nights too dark to find the dawn. but shattered glass can still reflect a light that others can't deflect. For though the vessel's wall may break, the essence none can ever take. Through pain, our spirit fiercely stays, a flame that guides through endless days. We rise, we heal, we claim our name. Through endless struggle, we proclaim, Am Yisrael Kai. So we want to start by acknowledging the collective pain that we've been experiencing since last year. The war in Israel and the atrocities of October 7th have shaken our sense of safety and identity. It's okay to feel overwhelmed. It's okay to feel anxious, angry. And these are all normal responses to traumatic events. And there's no right or wrong way to go through this. The space that we have tonight is meant to bring us together. This process, these complex emotions as a community. And by sharing this time together, we build resilience, we build strength by reminding each other that what we do to carry on this burden, we do not do it alone. Over to you, Malka.
Thank you, Julie. Since 10/7, our world has felt like it's upside down. For all of us, myself included, it's felt heavier, darker, and less stable. It's been a roller coaster, right? For the past 15 months, we've all been on a roller coaster. Whether or not we saw this roller coaster coming from before October 7th, or for some of us, it was like whiplash. There's been ups and downs, and in the middle, we're also trying to live our lives, and we have the combination all going on. But since then, we have been living with two realities. We have a physical war in Israel, and we have an emotional war in the diaspora, a war on anti-Semitism. The physical war is threatening our safety and our survival, and there are threats in the diaspora as well. The emotional war is this battle to protect our identity, our values, and our spirit from the erasure of anti-Semitism and cultural pressures. To quote Dara Horn, the author of People Love Dead Jews, she often talks about Purim anti-Semitism and Hanukkah anti-Semitism as two different kinds of anti-Semitism. So Purim is where they literally try and kill us and wipe us out. Hanukkah is when they're really trying to erase our identity. They're trying to take away who we are as people. So let's talk a little bit about the lessons of Hanukkah and how we're going to use the lessons of Hanukkah, which is in 2 nights from now. So we're really excited to be with you and talk to you about how are we going to learn these lessons and really learn how to transform the trauma and the stress and everything that we've been experiencing. So I don't know if many of you realize, but Hanukkah, the story that as we know, really took place over a 7-year period of time. We think of it as a one-time story, but it was really an ongoing struggle. And just like we're experiencing now, there was ups and there were downs. But the Greeks' aim and purpose was not just to conquer the Jews, but it was to erase their cultural and their spiritual well-being. They wanted to prohibit core Jewish practices, Torah study, Shabbos observance, circumcision, Jewish learning. These were the cornerstones of Jewish life. The assimilation pressures forced Jews into abandoning their traditions because they crashed with Greek culture. And if you really read some of the works from Dara Horn, what people had to do to really assimilate and give up who they are, it was astonishing and it was sad all at the same time. So the ultimate goal was to force the Jews to forsake their heritage for societal acceptance. Does that sound like something that we're also experiencing today? Eerily so. So we need to really look into that. Why is that this is the same things, and how are we going to learn from it? So one of the things that really stands out is the fact that the Maccabees were extremely outnumbered and outmatched. They didn't have an army like the Greek army. They did not have the power, the training, and yet they had the strength of working together and the wit of working together. And that is also true today in 2024. They were outnumbered, they were outmatched, but they had faith over fear. They risked everything to preserve their identities and their traditions, proving that courage can transcend even physical strength. Their victory wasn't just militarily, but it was a spiritual victory and a victory of identity. and preserving who they were. So what are some of the lessons that we could learn from that? So one of the things I wanted to talk to you about is first the dreidel game. Oh, the dreidel game sounds so easy. Does anybody here, just raise your hand, know about what the origins of the dreidel game was? Anybody can raise their hand that they don't know the origins of the dreidel game? So the origins of the dreidel game, to me, really, it really shows us how courage could be both creative and wit. The dreidel game was originally a way of learning Torah, but disguised as gambling. So what happened is they were outsmarting the Greek soldiers who would come in, who were very intimidating, and they would make it look like they just had a gambling game going on, and they didn't, instead of actually learning Torah. There were letters that corresponded with numbers on the original types of dreidel that don't look like the dreidels of today. And really, I think it's just a really powerful example of how we could use our creativity to overcome things that are really quite challenging. And the other thing I wanted to talk about is the oil. I think we're all aware that the oil lasted longer than they expected at the end, correct? We all understand that the oil lasted longer. When they actually were victorious and they came back to the temple to clean out the temple, that's the story that we were all told, that the oil lasted for 8 days. I think that the oil is something that we have to remind ourselves that just like we sometimes don't feel like we are enough, that sometimes we feel like we don't have enough strength, enough energy, enough hope, we can endure. We can sometimes surprise ourselves with the endurance and the inner strength and the inner courage that we have and that we were not even aware. When a community comes together in supporting each other, like events like tonight, and we can uplift each other, we can uncover our own personal miracles of personal growth, and we can keep those sparks going. So the Maccabees were, I want them to really look at them as our idols. They were our idols in the idea that they could have courage in the face of erasure. They chose us that today's erasure attempts to manifest distortions of Jewish history, culture, and identity. And we have to have that same level of creativity and faith. We have to have that defiance in our actions, and courage can happen in these small moments. And the most important thing that I think we're all aware of is that the light is the symbol. The menorah's flame represents our resilience and our defiance and our courage. Every time we light the menorah and we bring more light into the darkness, it is not a coincidence that Hanukkah falls out in the, for those of us on the East Coast, I don't know where everybody's calling in from, but this is the earliest of when it becomes dark at night. So let's just remember that the lessons of Hanukkah are here to tell us what our courage is standing firm in the face of overwhelming odds and refusing to let go. The oil is here to remind you that you may have more endurance and strength than you think you have. The light is that act of keeping our identity alive. And each of us, I believe each of us have the ability to be a modern Maccabee and preserve our shared heritage. So I'm going to ask you a question now, and I want you to write this question down. And then when we finish the presentation, we're going to come back to this question. How can you bring light into today's darkness, even when it feels overwhelming? How are we going to think about the lessons of the dreidel, the oil, the light, and the Maccabees and bring it to our lives? I'm going to turn it over to Jodi for a few minutes.
Thank you, Malka. I'm really excited that we're talking about Hanukkah in the face of the aftermath of October 7th, because just as all of our Jewish holidays give us a story, an example for lessons for life, I think that the Hanukkah story is very important to this moment in time for us as Jews. So courage in the aftermath of October 7th. As Malka had talked about earlier, this has been a really, really difficult time for all of us. And I think coming together as a community and talking about how to cope with it is very, very important. So first, we have to acknowledge the reality. We have to acknowledge that this is a very difficult time and it can be traumatic for all of us. It's not uncommon to experience fear, grief, and uncertainty. We can feel overwhelmed, anxious, or hopelessness. We are also struggling with the sense of betrayal from others we thought were our allies. I think that's one of the bigger challenges I've heard since October 7th of people feeling, wow, I thought these people were my friends. I thought I had stood up for this group of people, both in little and larger ways we've felt betrayed. So, how do we define courage? Courage isn't the absence of fear, but it's taking action despite fear. It's finding that strength to just move forward. Courage can fluctuate. It's persistence over perfection. So, when we think about courage, it doesn't have to be a grandiose gesture. It can be something small. Courage may mean standing up to someone in a little way or letting someone know, hey, what you just said to me, I feel uncomfortable with. Can we look at it from a different way? And courage can be different for everyone. So, how do we cope with the aftermath of October 7th? And I think part of what we're going to talk about today, but I think one of the largest themes is the resilience of the Jewish community. There's a reason we have existed over time, and it's not because of the hate, it's because of our resilience. And we've figured out how to, as a community, move forward and support one another. Our history emphasizes resilience, and in doing so, we can connect to our Judaism, we can connect to our Jewish community. You can learn more about your Jewish background, history, and faith, and you can find purpose in giving back through chesed or tikkun olam, so healing the world, giving back. Inspiration through action. So one way to cope with this moment is to actually to do something. And I know so many people have wanted to do something, and that's probably why you're on this call tonight, is to feel like, okay, in light of all the things that I can't change, is there a way that I can make this better for myself, for my loved ones, and for the greater Jewish community? So when we focus on light, we diminish the power of darkness. When ordinary acts can demonstrate profound bravery, each act of courage, no matter how small, contributes to resilience and healing. So I love this picture. It's a picture of a bridge and resilience in the face of adversity. Rabbi Nachman of the Breslov famously taught, the whole world is a very narrow bridge, but the main thing is to have no fear at all. Jewish resilience has long been about confronting pain and fear while finding strength and faith, community, and this echoes in modern resilience theory. A lot of people don't know, or you do already know or have begun to learn this year, that resilience really comes from Judaism. We are one of the most persecuted groups of people, and we've learned to persevere despite hate, bigotry, and misunderstanding. So how do we find courage in the aftermath of October 7th? So I'm going to ask this question. And I'm going to ask a question. So get your pens and paper and whatever you have to write with. So what's holding you back? What we want to know is what our fear is, what our triggers may be, and avoidant behaviors so that we can take these steps one at a time. So I'm going to lend this to everyone as their active homework. What does courage mean to you in the context of recent events? And feel free to, if you feel inclined, write it in the chat, and Julie will let us know, and we can see some of the things that people had talked about.
Okay. What does courage mean to you in the context of recent events? We have some answers coming in. Wearing my Jewish identity in more of a visible way. Went to Israel to volunteer. Sorrow, disappointment in the promise of America and Israel.
I love that. A lot of people have felt very strongly about wearing their Star of David and wearing highs and showing outwardly to people who may not know them and to people who do. Wearing yarmulkes, really letting other people know that we're proud. Going to Israel, which is incredible if you have that opportunity. Yeah, not crying every day. It's a big deal to not do that. Speaking out when you hear false accusations about anti-Semitism. And this can be really hard right now because it requires speaking out to people and to have a response back that we may not want. But it does take courage to say, you know what, I think you're wrong, despite a narrative. Ooh, marched in the Israeli parade. I love that for Israel and educating other people. We have been put in the position this year of a lot of people telling us about our history and what we should believe and how we should feel. And it's an opportunity. This can be used as a teaching moment to let other people know about us.
Thank you so much, Jodi. That was amazing. So now we're going to try and give you guys some practical steps as well. I think that one of the things is coming together in these events to get the validation is really important. But what makes Kesher Shalom projects a little bit different is we want to actually give you some tangible things to walk away with that you're going to actually feel like you gained some tools. So I want to talk to you about a therapy term, and the therapy term is called cognitive distortions. It sounds like a big term. I'm going to explain what it means in a second. But these are the ways that we can overcome our courage. And what Jodi says is 100% true, is a lot of these ideas actually come from the Jewish texts thousands of years ago. I actually took a gap year in my mid-20s to learn to do religious studies. And I was surprised how much of it matched what I learned in graduate school. So it is really amazing. So cognitive distortions are something that we all experience. It's completely normal. There are these automatic, these unhelpful patterns of thought that just kind of come into our brain. They're especially common after something that's difficult or overwhelming. And is anybody here a therapist that practices EMDR? Just raise your hand if there's any EMDR therapists here. Anybody? No other EMDR therapists? So that is one of the tools that I use as a therapist. So one of the basic core concepts of EMDR is that every memory that we have gets associated with a cognition, whether or not it's true. And often that cognition is always about us. I was unworthy. It's all my fault. I did something wrong. We always get this cognition that kind of gets stuck. So the good news is they're just thoughts. And just because you think something is true doesn't actually make it true. But these thoughts come in and they're there to kind of distract us. Sometimes they're making everything seem bigger than it actually is. Or they're overgeneralizing, like, oh, this always happens. Or it's black and white thinking. It's either this or this. And the worst thing of all, I think I'm guilty of it. I think a lot of people are guilty of it, are these should statements. Should. I should. So there's a lot of this should, or there's this magnifying, making it bigger or minimizing. I'm fine. It's no big deal. And of course, there's personalizing, which is extremely a Jewish trait. So we have all these different kinds of examples of the distortions. What's happening right now is only going to be magnified by the fact that the erasure anti-Semitism is coming in forms of, I actually call it macro gaslighting. Not only are we being gaslit, but we're being gaslit on a wide community level. And there's propaganda. So the people that are actually gaslighting us have been indoctrined. So there's, if you almost think of it as like different levels of coming at us with the gaslighting. And that's only going to contribute to the cognitive distortions on a much grander level. So what are we going to do about them? So we call them, the first thing is we have to identify the negative thought. So in the world of therapy, they're often called as automatic negative thoughts, ANTs. So when I work with my clients, I tell people that ANTs are just ants. They're little ants that are coming to ruin your picnic. And we don't have to let it ruin our picnic. If anybody here is also Gen X like me, a little bit older, and remember the Flintstones, it's almost like we have the little angel and the little devil on us. So it's that little devil coming to whisper all these things. We are in control of these ENTs. The ENTs are here, and they're here to kind of take us off track, which is also really interesting because it's in line with another Jewish idea. And that Jewish idea is the Yetzer Hara. The Yetzer Hara is often called the evil inclination, but really it's a cognitive distortion. And the Yetzer Hara is also something that comes to teach us that individuals are challenged to recognize and have an awareness of using strategies like self-reflection, mindfulness, and leaning into our faith. Believe it or not, mindfulness, leaning into our faith, self-reflection, these all came from our traditions thousands of years ago, even before the modern field of psychology was actually invented. So it really comes to teach us that we have to have a role of awareness and choice. We have to recognize the negative patterns. Judaism teaches us that humans have free will and can choose to overcome these Yetzer Hara, these conscious thoughts. In psychological terms, the ants allow people to pause, analyze, and reframe their thinking, shifting from a reactive to a proactive mindset. Spiritual and psychological growth point of view, these ants, these Yitzhahara thoughts, they're not necessarily bad, but they're a necessary force in spiritual and personal growth. So these ants can be seen as an opportunity to build resilience and cultivate a healthier thought patterns. So how are we going to do this? What we do is we take these thoughts and we have to challenge the thoughts. We have to say, we have the example here, anti-Semitism is everywhere. The world is against us. So we challenge the thought. Is that really true? Is anti-Semitism really everywhere? Do we have allies? Do we have support? Are there places where Jewish identity is celebrated? When we challenge them, when I teach therapists how to challenge them, I always tell people to lead with curiosity and kindness. We're not challenging them like a fight. We're challenging them in a way that's going to promote healthy growth and healthy challenging these thoughts that are coming to ruin our picture. So we're going to ask clarifying questions. We're going to be careful not to make assumptions. We're going to find out what are the stuck points. Is this extreme? Is this exaggerated? Is this out of context? A good example is, I can't handle this. It's too much. That's a thought that I think almost everybody, including myself, has had at different times and point. I can't handle it. It's too much. We have to check the evidence. We have to break it down. We have to highlight somebody's strengths, normalize, shift the perspective, and then add different affirmations like, I am stronger than I feel right now. It's okay to ask for help when I need it. I've gotten through harder times, and this is no different. So again, I want you to think of these 1, 2, 3s. We asked you guys to make sure you have pen and paper, identify the ANTs, challenge the thought, and then learn to replace that thought with a balanced, more perspective. So I'm going to break that down a little bit more for you. And what I do is I have this exercise called reframing the shadows. The reframing the shadows exercise is when we learn to turn our fears into empowerment. The other thing that's really interesting is we tend to be harder on ourselves than other people. Why can't we give ourselves that same kindness and grace that we offer other people? So again, I want everyone to take a few minutes and identify maybe 2 or 3 ANTs that have been holding you back, especially if it's in context to the anti-Semitism and the war in Israel. Take a minute, jot it down, and then we're going to talk about how we're going to work with these ANTs. Okay, so what's going to happen now is Julie's going to put us into 3 different subgroups that we can work through this with the challenging questions and the clarifying questions. Julie's going to randomly put us in, there's how many people today? There's 34 people. Julie put us into 3 different breakout rooms, and we're going to work challenging and reframing those thoughts. These thoughts are just that shadow that's coming, interfering with our light. And the goal tonight is how are we going to get that light through the darkness? So we have to figure out how we're going to get through those shadows. Go ahead, Julie. Put everybody in 3 groups, and then one of us will come to each group to kind of lead the group.
Okay. What am I supposed to do exactly in this breakout room? I'm kind of...
Yeah.
Okay.
We're going to have them challenge the negative thoughts. It's kind of the same thing as your what is my story exercise that you do.
Okay. So because I haven't done this before with the breakout rooms, how do I know that it's going to end or like
Julie's going to bring us all back in exactly 10 minutes.
in 10 minutes? Okay.
So Ethan, you need to go to a room. Ethan, which room has
And then what?
Put Ethan in room 8 because it has less people.
Yeah. And Malka, what do you want me to do through this?
So I should not be with Ethan. So either you pick room 1 or 2, and then you just click the join. Do you see that big box in front of you?
Me?
Yeah.
And then do I just ask people to bring this on?
Then you'll just lead the group. It's like 10 minutes. You'll just lead the group.
Like just ask them to put things in the chat or have them just say it out loud?
I saw all the names. Everybody's Jewish. I don't think we have to worry.
Yeah, just to say it out loud. Okay.
So Julie, should we give it 10 minutes or 12 minutes in the group?
10 minutes.
Okay.
I'll look at the time.
All right.
Julie,
What room
which group are you going to?
I'll do group.
I have to assign you, I think. Or
No, we could click into join.
Okay.
Okay. So I'll join group 1.
Okay, you go to group 1, and I will I'm going to go to group 2. Julie, you go to group 3.
All right. So I'm just saying we're going to the ANTs. Do you have any like text you want us to share? Is there anything that you have prepared? Like, is there anything that in the chat that you could put in?
No,
How do I know if people are raising their hands?
because you're going to go into your group and then just
All
let
right.
them talk.
Through the chat?
Okay. All right. So
All right.
go ahead. What room are you going into?
1.
Okay. Where's Malka go? She went into 2. I'm going into 3. Well, everybody, we're back. I'm sorry I let it get a little too long. We were having such a great conversation. I was just about to click the button, but thank you all for sharing your personal stories. It was amazing getting to know each and every one of you. And back to you, Malka.
Okay. Does anybody have anything that they want to add from this exercise before I turn it over to Jodi for the next exercise? Is there anything that you feel like you could take from reframing the shadows and work with it in your own life? Or just a show of hands, how many people feel like they could use some pieces of it? Some people, some not so. It's okay.
Something.
I think, can I just say one thing from our group, Malka? I think that one of the renowned themes of the group was that everyone appreciated being able to share their stories in this atmosphere. And people really appreciated the fact that this group existed because a lot of people are feeling disconnected and alone.
That if just even giving you a safe space for tonight is something that we accomplished, then I feel that we did accomplish even something. And if you now realize that we have a community, you are not alone in this feelings, then Jodi and I and Julie are really happy that we were able to do tonight's program. I'm going to turn it over to Jodi for the Building Your Courage candle exercise.
Thank you so much, Malka. And I wanted to add just a little bit to both what you and Julie were saying was that I think in our group, everyone was just wanting to share their stories, but also some of the things that they commented on, I'm going to talk about later on today. So the next step is we're going to talk about building your courage candle. So bringing in how we deal with this moment and using Hanukkah as a connection and purpose. So we're going to illuminate strength and support. So the purpose of this exercise, so get your pens and paper or your notepad out on your phone. It's to reflect on your personal strength, sources of support, and actionable goals. So we want to visualize resilience and courage as a lit candle to guide you through challenges. Draw inspiration from values, traditions, and practical strategies for empowerment. So thinking about keeping our candle burning for Hanukkah, we want to keep our candle burning for our resilience, our strength, and ourselves. So if we're going to write something, if we can, we're going to think about 3 different categories. So one would be our personal strength. How do we gain our personal strength and resilience? So through our kindness, our faith, our humor, our determination, creativity, perseverance, or the ability to find joy in small moments. What is your personal strength that you bring to the table in this moment that you can bring for both yourself and for others and the people that you love? Finding sources of support. Well, you showed up today. That's one way to do it. It's really important that we find community support. And I can't highlight this enough. Community support when we're feeling alone and feeling isolated is the key to feeling connected and to feel less alone. So we want to build sources of support through community. So whether that's an online community, all different forms of Jewish community that you can find in your local community through Jewish Federation, through synagogues, Jewish centers, maintaining family traditions. Sometimes in our busy life, it's hard to maintain all of the Jewish traditions, but I know a lot of people this year lighting those Shabbat candles, being able to say, okay, Hanukkah isn't just about gifts this year and it's not as important as Christmas. You showed up today for a Hanukkah event and what it really means to hear about the Hanukkah story, as Malka talked about earlier, that the meaning of our Jewish stories helps us in these moments. Spiritual practices like prayer or meditation, getting together with close friends, journaling, and engaging in acts of service or connection. All of these ways are ways to find sources of support. Then we want to take action too. So it can't just be internal, but we want to find a way to do actionable steps as well. Lighting candles with intention, creating a gratitude list, setting a daily routine for self-care, and attending a communal gathering or taking time to learn something inspiring. all of the items that I talked about a little bit earlier, and I'll get into this later on in the programming, help to build resilience, and they also help to combat trauma. So in our next step, even in the darkest moments, we can choose to find the light. It's not easy, but it's always possible. So remembering that our 3 candles here, finding strength, support, and our goals. So if everyone can take a moment to just jot down what your own personal strengths are, where you gain support or where you might need support, and what your goals are. And if anybody feels free to write it in the chat, we can share that, Julie, maybe. Somebody feels comfortable, let us know.
Nothing in the chat yet.
Oh, I see. People have been teaching racism for decades without using critical race theory. This is new research suggesting it's harmful. Yes, there is a lot of that. Looks like that was a little bit before, but people were talking about racism needing to be taught. Anti-Semitism is racism. The only problem is that they don't see that it's racism too. Thank you so much for bringing that up. For those of you who are not therapists on this program today, there are many therapists, myself included, Malka included, who are fighting to make sure that there's Jewish cultural competence in diversity, equity, and inclusion courses, and to make sure that we are teaching anti-Semitism as a form of hate to others, because without the definition and without that being taught, which we have been left out of those conversations, has allowed for the hate to fester. Ooh, I love that. Man's Search for Meaning and Viktor Frankl. So Viktor Frankl was a Holocaust survivor, and he wrote a wonderful book about the purpose and meaning and what he gathered. He also, I believe, was a psychologist for how Holocaust survivors found meaning amongst each other.
And it's also, you can tell them it's also part of our guard system, in the D of the guard system.
That's right. And then Ethan wrote in strength, faith, humor, meditation, support, family, religion, friends and goals, charity, and providing time to go to synagogue. Those are all great ways of choosing courage and building your courage candle. So we're going to move on next. Malka, we'll go to the next slide, and I'm going to talk a little bit about some grounding strategies. So for those of you who are not therapists, I'm going to provide some very brief but technical information to talk about our nervous system. When we think about trauma or think about really difficult moments, there's an activation in our nervous system. Most of us think about the sympathetic nervous system, which is the fight or flight response. And that's our sympathetic nervous system, that when we are in the face of a threat, that threat alerts us to let us know that something's wrong so that we take action. And so when we are faced with trauma and an active trauma, which means that we're currently in the trauma right now, anti-Semitism is still going on in the face of 10/7. We still have hostages that have not been returned. We're still in it. And the anti-Semitism is increasing, and we've all sort of learned that we're now in this different part of our history. So how do we calm our nervous system when we are activated? And I'll talk about one other thing too, is in my group earlier, there were several individuals who talked about different forms of trauma. So intergenerational trauma, for those of us who are grandchildren or our parents were Holocaust survivors, and what we take with us and when that's being activated this year. Those of us who have experienced individual trauma amongst friendships, or a person who's a colleague who displayed anti-Semitic behavior, which is a betrayal trauma. And then lastly, for all of us, an existential trauma and threat. That's what October 7th was, trying to wipe the Jewish people off the face of the planet and letting us know how they were going to do that. So I'm going to talk about some strategies to activate the parasympathetic nervous system. And this is the part of our nervous system that presents calm. It's the part of our nervous system that we want to utilize when we're feeling upset, activated, and having that fight or flight cortisol response. The parasympathetic nervous system also allows us to focus on the moment. So I'm going to talk about some of these grounding strategies. But before I begin, I want to let everyone know this is not a one size fits all. Some people may choose certain strategies that really worked for them, and others may choose other strategies. Take what you can. And also, some of these strategies work in different moments and at different times. So, mindfulness or meditation techniques. Start with centering practices to calm the mind and body. This can be just as simple as getting off your phone, trying to be present in that moment with your friends, your family, and just being in that moment without being distracted by a million different things. Breath work. So, introducing breath control as a foundation for relaxation. So if you're feeling really upset, or you feel like your heart is racing, or you're feeling anxious thoughts, you can use breath work to slow down so that you're able to take in that moment and to calm your body. Creative expression. There's been a lot of research recently to show the power of creative expression and calming our nervous system. So we want to encourage artistic outlets like painting, writing, or music to release tension. Physical touch. Sometimes it just takes a moment, whether we've done this either with our kids or our significant others or our pets, to just feel that, a hand, a massage, a gentle tap. And sometimes we can actually do this for ourselves. So there's a trauma grounding exercise, the butterfly hold, where we can take our arms and cross around and tap to start to activate our nervous system. But it can be very helpful just to calm ourselves down. Dancing. Dancing is a fabulous way to release energy and elevate our mood. Getting outside. Getting outside and engaging in nature can be incredibly grounding and gives us perspective. And this can be in many forms, even for those of us who live in New York City and we don't think about having a lot of nature, but just getting out of our apartments, getting out of our offices and looking up and seeing the sky and getting fresh air and taking a moment. Routines. Routines emphasize stability and safety. And it's important to maintain our routines. Often when we're traumatized, we can feel that we're distracted, we're not able to pay attention, we can feel really overwhelmed, but that routine is what keeps us balanced. And many of us learned this during COVID-19, and especially during the times when we were at home outside of our routines. Staying connected to friends and family. This is so important. For all the people and places that didn't show up for us, there are many people who have, and making sure that we avoid feeling isolated, especially when we feel isolated from others due to anti-Semitism, to connect with friends and family and the people who do support us. Joyful distractions. These can be used very easily, such as watching a movie, playing with a pet, listening to music. Do something in the moment just to distract your mind when you're feeling overwhelmed. Journaling. It can be really helpful for you to journal, especially if you're someone who thinks by writing. So I encourage you to journal for reflection, planning, or goal setting to create purpose and direction. So looking for things to be aware of in ourselves and others. So for this particular slide, I wanted to talk about professional mental health. And myself and Malka are therapists. And I think it's important to recognize that although we can provide a lot of coping strategies and ways in which to deal with trauma, it can be really important to seek mental health care when you know that your trauma symptoms, which can lead to anxiety and depression, that you may need to seek care with a therapist. So I'm just going to name a few here today. Hyperarousal or dysregulation. So feeling like you're having a really hard time. Dysregulation means that you're having a hard time regulating your emotions. And this could be that you're feeling tearful, or you're feeling anxious, or you're feeling irritable. Denial. This also can be a form of coping with trauma. ADLs, which are impaired daily functioning. So you're having a difficult time getting through the workday, being able to stay on top of household tasks. That's a good time to say, all right, I need to get some help and find a way to process this with a mental health professional. Heightened startle response. Cognitive difficulties, so including memory issues or distraction, feeling overly tired or fatigue, sleep or appetite disturbances, loss of a sense of self. Many people and many Jewish people have been feeling a loss of a sense of self. I can no longer feel I have a sense of my identity when I learned that my colleagues, or I learned that this greater group around me, and as some people mentioned during my breakout groups, a lot of the people and organizations that as Jews we have helped to support haven't supported us. are experiencing intrusive thoughts. This means that you may have a narrative that you keep running in your mind that you cannot get off of. Feeling foggy. We refer to this as brain fog, of almost feeling, that you can't recall things. You may feel a little bit almost like you have malaise or the flu, or feel hungover for another description. Avoidant behaviors, feeling numb, delusional thinking, irritability, dissociation, or triggers for relapse if you have a history of substance use or alcohol dependence. Active trauma can act like a magnifying glass for what was already on the surface. So even though the trauma is coming from anti-Semitism and Jew hatred, it may activate underlying issues that many of us have experienced. And I encourage you all to seek mental health help and assistance.
Thank you, Jodi. That was really very helpful. I'm just going to add, if you don't mind, 2 little pieces to what Jodi just said, is we all experience some of this some of the time. And just because you can check off one of this here or there does not mean that there's anything wrong with you. When we talk about it in terms of checking in with a mental health professional, I talk about it in terms of duration, frequency, and intensity. And are they interfering with your ability to function in your interpersonal relationships, in work or school, in your activities of daily living? Like, are you not able to get to the grocery store? So it's really, is it becoming an intrusive part? We really want to just let you know that asking and reaching out for help is a sign of strength, and it is a sign of courage, and not something to feel worried about in any sort of way. Thank you, Jodi, for really bringing that to the center. So I told you that we were going to kind of wrap it up with this idea of how are we going to bring the light into today's darkness, even when we feel overwhelmed. Even the smallest light can pierce the greatest darkness. And the other thing that I wanted to really point out is, you notice how when we light the menorah, we take the shamash, the one candle, and light from a candle to another candle to another candle. Think about that. It's such a beautiful thing. When we light one light, the original light does not get diminished. And that's an amazing thought, and a very deep thought when we think about it, is you can spread light to others without actually draining it from you. If it does feel like it's draining from you, then maybe we have to rethink that particular piece. But light creates light. And one thing I always tell people is light and love will always expand. Darkness and hatred will always seek to diminish. Anti-Semitism wants to extinguish everything, not just the Jews. We all know what starts with the Jews doesn't end with the Jews. But when we really bring it back to our messages from Hanukkah, we want to have this takeaway. We want to lean into the courage, trust the fact that you have the resilience. You guys are the oil. We are the oil. We are more than the one night. We have more oil than we know we have. Courage is also a kindness to yourself. Sometimes courage is setting boundaries when we need to. And saying no is sometimes saying yes to yourself and saying yes to your family. We want to light and hope guide you through the darkness. This Hanukkah, when you think about lighting your menorahs, I'm not trying to force any religious practices, but when we light our menorahs, I really want you to think about how are we going to spread that light into the world. So I wanted to now kind of come back to that discussion question, see if anybody has something they want to answer. And then at the end, if you feel comfortable, I do have the next screen of the prayer for the IDF soldiers, and whoever feels comfortable to stay for that piece, you can do the prayer for the IDF soldiers. So I'm asking you, we can, we're a close group now. You can just raise your hand and I'll call on you. How are you going to use some of the lessons from today to bring that light? What's your one small step forward?
I can share.
Okay, great. Who was that?
Maya.
Hi, Maya. Oh, Maya, it's so good to see you again.
Thanks.
Maya was on the first Rise Above. So it's very different, right? Each time we do it, it's going to be a different program.
Yeah. For me, I learned best to really just listen to myself, like have boundaries with myself. Like I recently deleted all my social media apps. And I feel so much better. I can contribute in praying. I can contribute in signing petitions and stuff, but I don't need to be exposed to actually see anti-Semitism going on like live or recorded. Like I found that it's the best for me, and just being connected to groups like this.
Okay, great. We do recommend, especially when we do the guard and we go in the U, about unplugging to replug. We recommend that you take at least 45 minutes, 5 times a week, away from social media and electronics. And again, if you really look at our Jewish traditions, we almost have that unplugging in our tradition of Shabbat. I'm not saying that you have to now, everybody, we should all just like become ultra religious, but taking the philosophies of those traditions and incorporating it in a way that's going to be meaningful for ourselves. Is there anybody else that has one takeaway that they can take away? Hi, Stephanie. I haven't seen you in so long.
I know, it's good
How
to
are
see you. For me, I think it's like one thing that has kept me going that I think I'll continue, like looking for the small joys and taking advantage from them and celebrating them and focusing more on that than the negatives.
Okay, thank you so much for sharing. And Stephanie, you just started a new job, right? Where are you now?
I am now at Wake Forest University as the Jewish chaplain and director of Hillel.
Okay, so I know that Stephanie's a Jewish community professional, so I'm sure that you've been hearing a lot of the same things that we've been talking about tonight. So I hope that you could take some of the lessons here and integrate them in your practice as well. Does anybody else want to share anything?
Sure, I'll share something.
Hi, Joanna. Nice to see you.
See you. So good to see you on the screen. So Jodi will understand this. For me, it's music. And so, as a social worker and as somebody who's really active in terms of standing up to all this Jew hatred that's going on, I can't turn off my social media. I feel like I need to continue to be engaged that way. And I know it can be a problem sometimes. But for me, it's going out for a walk with my dog, putting on some headphones, listening to my favorite music. That is everything. That allows me to step out of all the crap and just focus on the stuff that feels good for me. And going to concerts, that's the place that I get my collective effervescence from, that I get the collective joy. And it reminds me that there are still opportunities to be with other people, with strangers, and not feel in a place of hypervigilance, because that's what I feel all the time. So that's really important to me.
Okay, thank you so much, Joanna, for sharing. So our blessings to you is that we want you to always have your courage light your way. Do I have a volunteer? Maybe we can just end with 2 really interesting things. I love the quotes from Rabbi Lord Sachs. He's from England. Do I have a volunteer to read the top and a volunteer to read the bottom? Maya?
Yeah, I can read the top. All of us are, in some sense, survivors. To be a Jew is to carry the burden of memory without letting it rob us of hope and faith in the possibility of a world at peace.
Thank you so much. And Martha, you raised your hand. Do you want to read the bottom?
Sure. If we want to fight anti-Semitism, let us walk tall and proud as Jews, and let us work with all humanity to banish hatred forever.
Amen. Awesome.
Hi, Martha. Good to see you.
Hi, are you back from Italy?
I am.
Jodi was in Italy as of last night, so I just want to tell you how amazing she is for doing this with me tonight after coming right back from Europe. So Jodi's awesome.
Speaking of the power of community, Joanna, our mutual friend, I stopped off in Buffalo and we're on our way to Toronto next.
Oh, you're Joanna. Okay, awesome. So we don't like to impose any kind of religion, but this is sort of a general prayer for the IDF soldiers. If you don't feel comfortable, you don't have to participate. But do I have a volunteer who feels comfortable reading in Hebrew that would like to read the prayer for the IDF soldiers? I think it's a very apropos when we have a gathering of Jews coming together that we could just send a prayer to Israel, to the IDF soldiers, to our hostages, and we can it's a moment of solidarity for all of us. Do I have anybody who feels comfortable reading the Hebrew? Okay, Ethan, why don't you read the Hebrew?
Okay, I'll try. Mishaberach Abasina Abraham Yitzchak Yaakov, Yiberach Es Chayalei Tzava Hagana, Yisrael, Omdim Al, Ishmar, Ratzinu Ve'arei Eloheinu, Migvul, Lebanon, Ad Midbar Mitzrayim, Min Hayam, Agadabad Ba Araba, Be'abasha Ba Avir V'yam, Itim Adonai Oivenu, Makom Alinu Nefrim, Vim, Naham, Kadosh Baruch Hu, Shmarem, Silim, Mikol Tzara, Mitsuka, Mikol Nega, Machala, Yisra, Vishlach, Bracha, Vasach, Bacham Asib, Tehem, Yidaber Sonenu, Techin Senu, Tehem, Yat, Reem, Cheser, Mishua, Ches, וחסר ניצחון, ויתקיים להם כסו, כי אדוני אלוהיכם הולך עמכם להילחם לכם עם אבויכם, ושיעשכם נאמר אמן.
Amen. So if we could just send our prayers over east, but it's really everywhere that everyone should be safe. We should take a moment of silence for our hostages, that we should see their redemption soon.
There's a really hostages deal that is they're trying to get now. So it's really important to pray right now that it happens.
So, right. So as therapists, Jodi and I can't tell you to pray. Like, we're not going to try and force any kind, we can't necessarily force religion. It's this fine line. We want to increase Jewish traditions and values without actually forcing religiosity. But we want, part of fighting anti-Semitism is this erasure of our identity. So we want to really forth our value system, our history, our identity is part of the healing process. And if anybody here has been part of the guard training, they know that I integrate part of the Jewish philosophy with CBT, DBT, psychodynamic, and somatic pieces. So that's one of those things that I just think is really important. So I'm just going to give everyone 10 seconds. We're just going to take a moment of silence. I want to thank everybody for coming here and creating this special space. Even though it's virtual, I really feel like we had a great energy here tonight. I think all of you are very special. I hope that you will be able to take some of the light, some of the lessons that you learned tonight and take it in with you. I hope that you will stay part of the Kesher Shalom Project's community. You are, just to let you know, going to be automatically put into the newsletter. If you don't want it, you can unsubscribe. But tomorrow you'll get 2 emails. One will be a follow-up from today. And the second email will be the regular newsletter. We have a regular Hanukkah message. We have a rabbi that sometimes helps us. He wanted to send out a message. So Rabbi Eli Kivon wrote a beautiful piece. We'll be sending that out. On January 15th, I will be teaching a class called Fractured Identity, the psychological impact of anti-Semitism on individuals, communities, and society. And it's actually the flip side. It's not actually focusing on the Jewish impacts, but why and how people are falling for the indoctrination. You don't actually have to be a mental health professional to sit through it. It is designed for mental health professionals, and they will be eligible for their continuing ed credits in all 50 states in Canada. But that's one I think that's very important. And I have a lot of people, especially if you're in Jewish leadership, to sit through and really kind of digest it. The classes are a lot more formal than the workshops. Julie, do you have any ending thoughts? And Jodi, do you have any ending thoughts? I want to just thank everyone for their time and for being here and for your courage.
Thank you, Malka. Thank you, Jodi. Thank you, everybody, for joining us tonight. I want you to keep moving forward and shining your light. And we appreciate you all. Thank you so much for joining us. And there are so many groups that Malka has started to help support the collective. And so please look out for our emails that are coming to you. We're going to be providing some groups that will help you be in community with other people that are experiencing the same thing. So I wish you all a happy holiday. Thank you.
Happy Hanukkah to everyone. And we really appreciate you coming and taking the time. This is part of what the resilience is just being with everybody. And this is the beauty of Judaism, is for a group of strangers, I think we all feel safe and connected in some way. And I'm thankful for that. So thank you.
And thank you. And if you could fill out the Google form, the feedback form, it really helps us with structuring and knowing what programs to put out. It's in the chat and it will be in the follow-up email. And our contact information will be in the following email. Have a good night and happy Hanukkah.
Happy Hanukkah.
Happy Hanukkah. Bye.
Happy
Hanukkah.
Happy Hanukkah.
Happy Hanukkah.
Happy Hanukkah. Happy Hanukkah. Are there still people in the room, Julie?
Yes. All right. Well, there you have it.
All right. What do you guys think for tonight? How do you think it went?
I think that people wanted to talk more. The breakout rooms. I don't know. I couldn't get out of my breakout room. That's why I didn't end the room. They were just talking and I'm like, oh God, what do I do?
I think they wanted more breakout rooms. So maybe we need to structure that next time.
They need to.
How was your room? Jodi,
It was, I think it's the same reason that, you and I had talked over the summer about doing support groups, because this is kind of representative of my New York social workers group, is that people are really looking to connect and find some support. So I think it's great.